Good evening. Welcome to another SteamPaper video, and tonight we're going to be interviewing three. What's the right word? Masters of comic books. Let's call them that. Publishers of comic books. But first of all, I just wanted to recap. Remember, we're doing the Steampunk Over Ether Festival, 25th, 26th of April. And so we're having a virtual steampunk festival, and we're looking for content. We've had quite a lot of response already. We have some great things coming in. And so we're looking for other content as well. So if you're a writer, a performer, musician, artist, or you just simply make things, then do send us a video. We're going to feature lots of different things over the weekend. We've got lots of different plans. We've got some great stuff already, and we've got some really fun things to show you. And of course, in the run-up to that, we've been doing these videos. We've been doing interviewing with various people from around the steampunk world, to the kind of people you'd meet at a festival, talk to at a festival, and learn stuff from. And tonight I'm quite chuffed because I'm a big comics fan. I have been for many years, and so it's great to talk to these guys. So I'm going to introduce them to you now. So we have Colin Mathieson from Accent UK, along with his colleague Dave West. So Colin, give us a wave.
Hello there. Good evening.
Dave, give us a wave.
Hey.
And then we've got Steve Tanner from Time Bomb Comics.
Hello.
Who I'm very disappointed with because he isn't wearing one of his trademark shirts today. You can always spot him at one of the Comic Cons because you can see him a mile off with this flashing shirt normally he wears. But anyway, so I wanted to just ask you, first of all, a little bit about what it is you do. So starting with Colin and then maybe Dave and Steve.
Sure. Well, like everybody else, perhaps, I'm a lifelong comic fan since being a small boy up in the Highlands of Scotland. So much so, I started making my own comics, and currently I write comics, I draw comics, and with Dave, we publish comics as Accent UK. And I might have a strange, low-budget comic movie feel with my lips and my voice things at the moment, I think. But I'm basically involved in all aspects of comics, and you might see me at exhibitions and festivals talking about comics, or showing you some of the comics we've produced.
Cool. And Dave?
Yeah, similar really. So I've grown up with comics, moved from kind of the likes of Dandy and Beano straight through to superhero comics mostly, probably in the 70s. And then like Colin, I started producing my own probably just in the 90s, late 90s. And we got together, formed Accent UK in 2001, I think it was. So I've been around for quite a while, moving from anthologies through to ongoing series.
Cool.
And I kind of write, draw, do collaging, do all sorts of things. Anything creative.
Yeah. And Steve?
Well, I've been like Dave and Colin. I've been into comics for years and years since I was little, and Time Bomb started in 2007. I set Time Bomb up, and actually I set that because I went to a convention in 2006, and it was the first convention I'd been to for a long time, and I was amazed to see there were so many indie publishers there, and I really liked the kind of stuff they were producing. And actually, Accent UK were there before I actually knew them. So they were one of the guys that I got my, inspiration from to do it myself. So since then, I've kind of slowly built up Time Bomb, and it publishes one-shots, graphic novels, and a few ongoing series.
Cool. Well, we've had a few people joining us already, so you can say hello to Tom Brown. Hi, Tom. Andy Arbon, who we talked to from the Cthulhu party the other nights with us, thank you. James Bollinger, and also Jorgen Carlson, I hope I pronounced that right, from Sweden. Hello from Sweden. I'm quite impressed with that.
Matthias.
Oh, right, okay. So just to complete the introduction, I mean, my introduction to comics was probably TV21. I mean, that was. I did have a few issues of the Eagle, I think, but TV21, which is going back a long way, was my introduction to comics. And then from there, it was basically I got hooked on 2000 AD, and then from then on, it was 2000 AD, Judge Dredd, pretty much all the way. I had a collection of American comics, but I always preferred, for some reason, the British ones. And I liked. We'll talk about this in a bit, actually, but I liked the anthology that 2000 AD was, but unfortunately I could never draw, so I never got around to making my own comics. So I'm very much appreciative of the art of illustration in comics, so I'm a big fan. Colin and Dave, you're probably most well known amongst steampunks anyway for for the stuff you do on the Asylum comics. So I'm just going to bring those up so we can talk about them. So you created this comic called Enter the Asylum. So tell us a little bit about how that came about.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can't really take the credit for that, but was it our second Asylum, I think, Dave? After the second Asylum, the first time we went, we were used to comic conventions. We were aware of steampunk, but we weren't really aware of the full momentum that Asylum offered. So the first time, which is maybe 2016, we were kind of blown away by it a little bit and a little bit on the sidelines. So when we went back in subsequent years, we really wanted to get closer with the community of steampunk, get to know a few more people and so forth. And I can't really take the credit. Pass over to Dave, because it was actually Dave's idea for the comic itself.
Yeah, okay. Just before we do that, I'm just going to bring up because you've done it for a couple of years now, so I'm just going to bring up the next one while you talk about it.
Yeah, so I'll take it a little bit. So yeah, we so at the typical conventions we go to, you get people dressed up as, you know, Spider-Man, Batman, or whatever. There's not much you can do without being sued by Disney or Warner Brothers. But in the Asylum thing, we began to realise these people that dressed up as lovely characters actually were characters. They had their own names, their own little backstory. If you probed, they had a little, you know, who they were and what their kind of what their thing was, whether it was an adventure or a chemist or whatever. They all had a story to tell. So we kind of thought, well, we could possibly build them into comics, so we could tell comic stories about their characters with their permission. So it's on the. So we had this idea the night before the last day. So the next day, we quickly grabbed a few people and said, "Look, would you be interested in a comic we're looking to do about you? You know, so we get it drawn, we get your permission, we'll let you see the pages and the story, so that you're involved, and you make sure you're happy with what we're doing." And you know, about 5 people met. They all said yes. So we thought, oh, okay, wait a minute, we need to calm down here because we don't want to make a book of it. We want to do a few. So you know, it's really been embraced by the community. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite surprising because, you know, a lot of steampunks are very shy and retiring, and, you know, they don't do much now. And then the last comic you did, of course, had Superstars V2A, the big post-apocalyptic band in them, which is brilliant. So how did that come about?
Well, so as soon as the first one came out, Kevin, kind of lead singer, contacted me through Messenger and said, "We must be in the next issue." I said, sorry, who are you? And he said, V2A. I quickly Googled it because I've not really come across them, I must admit. But he was so kind of enthusiastic, and I looked at the pen and thought, wow, it's just Mad Max, you know, on drugs, really. So let's kind of do something. So yeah, collaborating with those guys, Kevin in particular. And then I got, you know, Gustavo. Fortunately, I got Gustavo, who's becoming quite well known in the UK scene as an artist. Yeah. Got him to do the art on it, and it just worked really, really well.
It did. I thought it suited them down to a T, and I think actually, you know, I think it really did, you know, did hit it. So while we're talking about that, do you think you're going to carry on doing Asylum comics?
So we're in production. Yeah. Go on,
yes. Yeah, it's kind of, you know, like the best ideas, simple ideas. It's got a real life of its own. Yeah. And you hit the nail on the head earlier, Keith. You know, who knew that the steampunk community would actually embrace the idea of featuring in a comic? So no sooner did the first one come out, our table at the Asylum was totally mobbed by, oh my friends in this, can I be the next one? Yeah. And we almost got too many ideas, too many options. So we have actually at the last Asylum, again towards the end, we've hatched a cunning plan to satisfy as many people as we can in this issue, which I don't know, Dave, whether we can exclusively reveal not the concept, but maybe the name of the next issue.
If you can remember it, then go for it.
Well, I think it's Escape from the Asylum.
Escape from the Asylum. Well, that's good. So the first one was Enter the Asylum. The second one was Return to the Asylum. So this will be Escape from the Asylum.
Yeah, Escape from the Asylum. We'd be missed not to mention the cover artist, Gary Crutchley. Yeah. He's the one who's been, you know, made a fantastic job capturing everyone's likeness. He's also a big, you know, movie fan from 1970s, particularly cult sci-fi movie. Yeah. And if you think about the titles we've mentioned, it might suggest which movies he's a fan of, and it might give you a clue. I was going
to say, I'm expecting Snake Plissken to be making an appearance, frankly, with that name. So, Steve, let's talk a little bit about the comics that you're responsible for. And I know probably, again, what most people probably know you for is Flintlock. Now, I would say that the comic itself is not overtly steampunk, but it does feature as one of its main characters and probably one of its most iconic characters as the Clockwork Cavalier. So now he's got to be steampunk, hasn't he? I mean, let's face it, he's made up of gears and clockwork.
Well, as I understand it, I mean, and it was only the going to the Asylum that I kind of realised the phrase was is clockpunk, because that's the period that's set. I understand immediately before the Victorian era, which is the traditional steampunk era.
Yeah.
Flintlock. One of the key thing about Flintlock is that it's all set in the 18th century.
Yeah.
So all the stories take place at some point during those 100 years of history. And the Clockwork Cavalier itself, he's very much kind of inspired by the old kind of 1960s, 1970s classic British comic characters, things like the Steel Commando, Archie, Robot Archie. Yeah. So it's kind of following in that kind of vein. Although I stress that the Clockwork Cavalier isn't a robot. He's actually a wind-up clockwork man. But
he's a wind-up.
He's a wind-up. He's very much a wind-up. Yeah. And yeah, so the Clockwork Cavalier is very much quite unusual in the Flintlock series. Another reason is because he is the only properly considered male character or masculine character, because all the other characters in the series, they're all the leads, they're all women. So he is the only kind of what would look like a male lead, but of course he's not a proper man. He's an emasculated clockwork automaton. Yeah, which probably says a lot about the ideas behind Flintlock.
Yeah, one of the comments just had, I tried to put it up on screen, failed, is from Ali Allgood, who says she loves the Flintlocks. So there you go. I like the Flintlocks.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
that's great. I'm really pleased that you're enjoying the series. That's terrific.
Greg McNeil says hi, Colin. So there we go. Now also you've been responsible for a thing called Brawler, which basically is a compilation of different stories, all of which have a different theme. Again, not all steampunk. Probably the most steampunk is the one that features Major Rakana. But I did actually really love this because, again, it reminded me very much of 2000 AD, the idea of having different stories with different related themes. So how did Brawler come about?
Well, again, the inspiration for that, I mean, you picked up on being very retro, and the idea behind it was a comic that is fondly remembered by a lot of comics fans who grew up in the 1980s. Was a monthly series called Warrior, which it didn't last very long. It only lasted about 2 years, but during that time it brought some classic kind of characters. It either reintroduced them, characters like Marvel Man. It was where V for Vendetta first appeared. It had all these kind of very unique kind of characters, and it's fondly remembered. So the idea was using Warrior as an inspiration to create an anthology where each of the stories could be the lead story within the anthology, because usually in an anthology comic there is one character or one series that is the distinctive lead, and the perfect example would be 2000 AD. The lead character is Judge Dredd. It's always Judge Dredd, and you referenced the Eagle earlier on. The lead character in that was always Dan Dare, but the idea with Brawler, you'd have all these different characters, and each one of them could potentially be the star of the show. So it was tapping into lots of different kind of genres as part of that, and also then working with lots of different writers and artists to bring the strips together. Yeah,
and then again, if people have been to the Asylum, they might well have seen the Foxglove chat book, I believe you called it.
That's right, and this is something which only exists because of the Asylum, because it was, I mean, when I went to the first Asylum that Time Bomb did, I went with Time Bomb. It was eye-opening. It was such a great event, and it was the first time I'd really properly been immersed in steampunk. I mean, I was familiar with the whole kind of steampunk ideas because seeing some of the steampunks and the Major and yourself at some of the other shows, but the actual event itself kind of blew my mind. But one thing I wanted to do after that first event was do something just for the Asylum going forward. So the chapbooks are just produced for each Asylum that myself and Time Bomb attend, and they're done in the style. The idea is they're done in the style of the Victorian chapbooks. So they're a mixture of text story and comic strip, all featuring this character called Jemima Foxglove. And each of the chapbooks are produced in very small numbers, just for the Asylum weekend. They're not offered they're not offered online. They're not done through Kickstarter. They're just produced as an exclusive just for the show. And it's just a nice way to, I guess, to kind of give something back a bit, I think.
Yeah.
And again, they seem to have found a bit of an audience as well. And for me, of course, it was a bit out of my comfort zone because it was the first time that I'd actually done try to do traditional text stories, because normally I just write comics.
Incidentally, we had a comment from a question from Tom earlier. He said, if I can get up on screen, I have a question for the esteemed gentleman. I'm thinking of getting into comics. Do they think that would be a good idea? No. Okay. All right. We'll say no. Good. All right then. So I was going to ask Colin, what and Dave as well, maybe. What's the process for creating a comic book these days?
Well, and here's some top tips for young Tom out there as well, perhaps. It's a very sort of laboured process, unfortunately. I write and draw my own stories. So first you've got to get the idea for a story, of course. Then you've got to plot it out, work out how many pages it's going to take roughly, make sure it's entertaining, hopefully. Then you start on the artwork. And one of the benefits, if you're actually illustrating your own stories, actually, you can make it a bit easier for yourself. You don't need to write a full script. So I tend to make little notes and bullet points of the story, and then the artist in me, which interpreting that story, I've got some flexibility in how to arrange it best, and I make some changes as I go along. But you then pencil that story. I use large, like A3 size piece of paper. I use traditional HB pencil. Mm-hmm. I'm very old-fashioned. I'm not very good with tech. Lots of people nowadays work digital with your tablets and such like, but I do it the old-fashioned way, which is much more tactile, having the paper and pencil. But it takes a long time then to get the pencils down. Then, also being a traditionalist, I use a dip pen, a nice little jar of India ink, and a wee, crow quill pen that you see for calligraphy and such like. And I then sort of ink every panel painstakingly, try not to smudge it along the way. I
can see Dave shaking his head there. Do you use a different process?
Yeah, I'm in the 21st century.
So how do you recreate it then?
Well, so when I first saw Colin's work, I saw that he'd actually lettered each page in pen as well on the page, and I just couldn't believe it. That's just so painful. And if you make a mistake, you end up with Tipex, or so it's a real problem.
Yeah.
So I tend to get more other people to draw most of my stuff now, because I haven't got time to draw it myself. I get good at drawing, do a very cartoony style if I do something at all. But I tend to draw it in pencil and then scan it. Yeah. Then colour it and maybe ink it on the screen, so you can darken the pencils and things on the computer, and it can look.
Yeah. Oh, I think we just. Okay.
But as soon as I can, I get onto the computer so that if I make mistakes, I can just reverse them.
Yeah.
And it means throwing the page away. And colouring and all the rest of it is the thing I think that Colin didn't mention probably in his little talk at the beginning was you have to think about the economics of it as well pretty early on. So quite often, if you're left alone, you can do hundreds and hundreds of pages of this wonderful stuff, and then when you come to work out the cost of it, it's going to cost you £10 a copy to print, and you can't sell it for enough money to it's just so you got to think about the economics as well.
Yeah,
the print cost, the artist cost, if you get a colorist cost, all those things need to add up, and they need to help you set up the price of the comic itself, the retail price.
Yeah,
and if that's looking too expensive, then you need to think of something else.
Yeah, so this because obviously you're all operating. You're all operating in the world of commercial comics. You're trying to make comics to sell. You're not doing it for your own benefit. So that's an important thing. So, Dave, you mentioned you get other people to draw stuff, and something I want to ask Steve is how you find, because you're doing compilations like Brawler. How do you find the talent? How do you find the writers and artists, and to work with you?
Well, I mean, there's lots of channels really. I mean, what's quite encouraging is that as the years have gone on, we've received more and more direct submissions. Yeah. So every week I usually get between 20 and 30 emails a week, which is from potential comic creators who are looking for opportunities. So that's one channel, but also because I tend to do a lot of the shows and a lot of the events, I kind of know a lot of people in the community as well. So a lot of it is just asking somebody if they'd be interested in joining the team and working on something. So it's far and wide really. I mean, one of the nicest things I like about whenever I do an event is when there are potential kind of creators there, and someone turns up with a portfolio and they want me to have a look through their samples. That's always a really nice kind of part of doing events. And there's been a couple of people that have come that end up doing stuff for Time Bomb, who've come through that channel. An example is Ben Lopez, who was did the colour art on the Clockwork Cavalier special. At the same time, Francesco Arcadiacano, who was the line artist, he actually came through that submissions channel. So I received an email from him at some point. So that's where I usually kind of tend to find people tend to kind of come to me, but at the same time, if I am looking for someone or some particular style, I'll put a shout out on the social media, and I'll normally get a few responses in that way. So there's a lot of people out there who are interested in creating comics, which is kind of a nice. So there's a wide talent pool to choose from.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always impressed whenever I go to a Comic-Con. They usually have the area called the Comic Village, and there's always there's you guys there, there's other people there, but there's always so much talent there. I mean, not always things that I personally like. So for instance, to give an example, fairy drawings. I'm not really into fairy drawings. I'm a bloke. I'm not really into fairy drawings. But some of the artists that draw them, their talent is incredible. And so I kind of go, yeah, I really love this stuff. It's not my thing, but I love it. So there's so much amazing. And I think you're right. I think there seems to be more of it around now than ever there was before, or maybe we're just exposed to it more. I don't know.
No. I think there is definitely more of it. I think one of the things that I've noticed, and I'm sure Dave and Colin would have noticed it as well, that when we kind of first kind of started getting into doing comics, it was still very much a boys' club. And what's kind of changed, over the years, is that now there's far more female artists, and that's a great thing because they have their own particular styles, they have their own particular audience, and now it's no longer a boys' club. It's a real leveler. So there's no matter what your background, no matter what your interest, you can create comics, but also no matter what your interest or background, there will be a comic which will be of interest to you. And I think that's one of the great things about comics these days, certainly in the UK.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. I agree with that. Again, Comic-Cons, there's just such a wide diversity of different people creating comics, and I think that's absolutely brilliant. And because it brings so many different influences and things into the comics as well. I wanted to ask, actually, probably Colin and Dave, obviously now we live in a digital age. Colin, you still work with paper, but the rest of us live in a digital age. And I mean, I still religiously collect 2000 AD. I still get it delivered. It still comes along with Judge Dredd, and I have piles and piles building up, and with boxes and boxes since goodness knows how long ago. So, and I still do collect printed comic books. I do collect them in person, but I'm doing an awful lot of reading of what I call mass-produced comics like Marvel and all the Marvel range, DC range. I'm a big fan of Valiant as well. I love the Valiant characters. But I'm doing all that through Comixology, which is all digital. So when it comes to a creator, a person who's created their own comic and published it, I will go out and buy that because I think it's really important to do that because it supports people. But for the mass-produced stuff, I generally use Comixology. So how has that changed producing comics? Or I mean, it may not have produced it for you, but do you see it changing comics?
I'll probably defer to Dave on this one. It's no great surprise to anyone that I find it very difficult to actually read comics on the screen. Although it's clearly, not the future because it's here now and has been for several years.
Yeah.
I do prefer having to hold it in my hand. But I know Dave has experimented in this newfangled technology a wee bit more than I have.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, just to your point about reading comics, so I tend to prefer to read the physical thing myself, but mainly because I want to hand it over to my daughter when I finished it, and she can then read it or keep it. Whereas if it's Comixology and things, you can't easily share those.
No, nor should you in a way.
Well, I don't know, but should you not share your comic that you bought, a physical copy? What's the difference? But anyway, that's
I don't know. I kind of have. I don't know. You're good point. Actually, I have this thing that if you kind of bought it digitally, then maybe somebody else should buy it digitally, and you shouldn't really kind of pass it on. If it's physical, it's kind of, I don't know. Yeah, maybe they should buy their own copy of that as well.
Well, maybe, but then they get their money from the Bank of Dead anyway, don't they? So
no, I still prefer a physical book. But I'm finding a lot of the comics, like the mass-produced, like for instance Marvel. I'm a big Marvel fan, and a lot of their stories I'm reading for the story mostly to try and keep up with the character because I'm into the character. I want to know how it turns out and everything else. And so so that's the big thing for me, and it's so important. Plus, if I did go out and buy them, I couldn't afford it because they're much cheaper to buy digitally than it is the printed thing. And secondly, I'd have nowhere to put them. I'd have a house full. So.
Yeah, and that's the point. So if you want to just read it, they're not really the collector's items, I think, typically that they used to be. So comics used to gain value.
Yeah.
But I think when they started producing the anthologies and the collections, I think the money kind of market went away a little bit, and people. I mean, I used to trying to get back issues of Fantastic Four, and you pay a fortune for the early issues, so you couldn't afford them. Yeah. And then they put a massive omnibus that collects the first 200 copies or something, 200 issues, and it's like 60 quid or something. You get, you could pay that for number 50.
Yeah.
So it's saying like, well, why do I need the comics? I just buy the trade, or the graphic novel, etc. So that changed things initially. In terms of producing our own stuff, so Comixology and the like, they do take percentages.
Yes, of course they do.
We got scared of. We had one comic. We got Western War issue 1 on Comixology, but then they want to have your tax details, etc., etc., etc. Well, I pay tax in the UK. I don't want to pay it to the American. It's that it becomes quite troublesome. Really, I'm not quite sure legally where it all stands and sits, so I kind of backed off of it.
Yeah.
But we do send out digital PDFs for our Kickstarters and things, so people can get stuff digitally.
Yeah.
But we tend to deal mostly with Kickstarter and cons, and mostly with physical.
That's actually quite cool because that leads me on to my next question seamlessly, which is going to be for Steve. Because Steve, you've run a number of successful Kickstarters. Flintlock's been phenomenally successful as a Kickstarter. So, do you see that as the changing face of comics as well? I mean, a lot of comics are now going straight, are being published via Kickstarter. I collect I get quite a few that way, various different things. How do you see Kickstarter as influencing comics?
Well, I think the key thing with Kickstarter, it's offering now an alternative means of distribution, and I think that's a really important part of the whole kind of Kickstarter kind of platform. Now, I think originally the idea was it was to ask for funds so you could get your comic printed if you didn't have any funds to do that. And I think more and more people are now approaching it in a different kind of way and using it as a means to get your work out there. So it's not so much asking to cover the cost of the production of the comic, but just to use it to build an audience.
Yeah.
And that's how I approach it. So what I find, especially with things like the Flintlock books, because each one has been placed on pre-ordered through Kickstarter, that the audience for each book increases. And where it's really made a difference is tapping into the international audience, because for those of you who are unaware of how comics work, there's only one distributor really for comics, and they're called Diamond. So if you're not listed in the Diamond catalogue, you won't be able to get your books into any to an audience overseas, and it'd be challenging to get them across the UK. But Kickstarter seems to offer a means of tapping into that direct audience. So one of the nice things for me is seeing that international audience grow. Now, the last Kickstarter that I did, the pre-order for the Dick Turpin and the Vengeful Shade, that had 50% of the pre-orders came from overseas. So that's a huge kind of difference compared to when I was recently looking at the numbers, and the first kind of pre-order I did on Kickstarter, it had, I think it was about 18-20% of overseas. So it's a big jump. And the other thing is, as well, of course, is that if you're going through a distributor, you rarely actually see the person who's reading your comic. You rarely have any connection with them, only if they come up to you at an event. However, if someone pre-orders your book through Kickstarter, you have that personal connection straight away, and I think that's a really nice thing as well. So you're straight away, you're reaching your audience, and you can interact with your audience in really directly, and I think that's one of the real benefits of using the platform. I think at the same time, I think if anyone that's considering doing a Kickstarter, and this ties back to what Dave was saying previously, you really need to kind of make sure your costings and what you're asking for are realistic, and you're not asking for a silly amount. I think one of the things that you see sometimes on the platform now and again, and I think it's the same for Indiegogo and any of the other crowdfunding platforms, that people see it as a means to, I guess, be greedy. Let's be honest. And when you see comics that are, 24 pages, 32 pages long, and they're trying to get £15,000 for them, it's just a nonsense, because there's no way those comics cost that much to produce. So I think if you approach it in a sensible way, and you cost it properly, and you do it at a fair price, then I think you will find an audience for your comic through Kickstarter. I think I think a lot of it, of course, is also if what the quality of the product being offered appeals to the audience as well, because that's a key part of it too, I think. But I think it's a great means to get things out there.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I've noticed is there seems to be a lot of quite. You used the word today, Colin. On Facebook, a lot of lurid comics out there, because I think there's obviously there seems to be a market for that, which is a shame. But there's also a lot of really interesting comics out there exploring really different ideas. So I think Kickstarter is a great thing, and is same with board games as well. It's doing great guns in, and it misses out the retailer and the wholesaler. So it kind of, which is good and bad, but I think it's in some ways it's very good, because you're being able to. It costs less to produce, costs less to pass on, and you've got a more direct connection with your customers. So anyway, Accent UK. What's going on in the world of Accent UK at the moment? What's plans? What's happening next?
Well, it's always a busy time. There's always things going on. Dave and I tend to work on individual projects and then come together for joint ones. And the joint one clearly is the next Asylum book, which with Gary Crutchley we're putting together at the moment with submissions. I was personally going to be working on my long-awaited graphic novel about fairies, but I might have to rethink that now, I think.
Pay no attention to me at all. Incidentally, while you mentioned the Asylum, I have to say, Malika said, will the fourth instalment, the one after this next one, be break back into the Asylum, we realise we made a terrible mistake leaving? So
that might need some work, but I like it.
Yeah. Do you go on, I was going to say, are you working on a Zulu book?
Funnily enough, you should mention that, Keith. Anyone that knows me will know that I've got
you have to Zulu. Pass it the other way. There you go. Yeah.
There we go. And it's been worked on for some time. I saw the movie at a very young, formative age, and that made a big impression on me. And I've been fortunate many years later to actually travel to South Africa and visit the battlefields of Rorke's Drift and Isandlwana.
I was going to say, I don't know what the expenses are going to be on this comic book job, but travel to South Africa to do the research. That's got to make it expensive.
Well, apparently it's all deductible.
Oh, okay, yeah. I mean, certainly.
This is why I can't afford to go digital.
Yeah. Somebody, I apologise for pronunciation, but Gustavo Vargas Tassige, I'll probably pronounce that wrong, really sorry, says, hello, lovely people from the Asylum, Dave and Colin.
So he's the artist on the Toxic comic.
And somebody called Scott, who might be related to you, Colin, is mocking your delivery of the book Zulu, apparently.
Oh.
And John Naylor saying, if it's a Zulu book, surely there should be thousands of them.
Okay. Very good. But I'm taking the opportunity. It is very close to being finished, cool. And I might have to embrace the modern world and look at Kickstarter for this, which we've done for a couple of the Asylum books and some of Dave's projects, but to be the first time. I'm just wondering what sort of extras and stretch goals I can do with something called Zulu. I might have to use my imagination for that.
Free assegai. That's what you need.
It could be assegai through the post.
Delivered by hand. No, you'll have one backer in me. I'm massively fascinated with the Zulus and with Shaka Zulu. I've been to it. I've been to Isandlwana, if that's the right pronunciation. So yeah. So you've got one backer, guaranteed.
That'll do. Excellent.
So the Asylum book and that, and Steve, what's Time Bomb Comics working on?
Oh well, we've got a lot of stuff going on at the moment. We always seem to have a lot of stuff going on. I mean, the next thing that'll be out will be the Dick Turpin book, so that'll be going to the printer by the end of April. Yeah. Then we've got the second issue of Brawler that's coming close to being done as well.
Cool.
Flintlock 5, book 5 should be out later this year. Yeah. Hopefully we'll all be at Asylum again this year, and if we are, then there will be another instalment of Foxglove. And we've also there was a couple of things as well that we were just getting ready to announce before the world changed. Yeah. So we're going to wait now until things settle down, and we'll be announcing those. But they're being worked on as well. At the moment, we've got about 8 or 9 different kind of projects being worked on.
Not busy then.
No. There's always room for more, isn't there? So things are quite busy.
Had a good question here from Malika. Perhaps you'd each like to answer, which I think I like this one. What's the strangest comic book you've ever worked on, and why? So, Colin, let's start with you. What was the strangest comic book you've ever been associated with?
Probably 12.
12?
12. When Dave and I started, we did lots of themed anthology issues. And it was actually someone who will go on nameless. Suggested, let's do a comic called 12. My previous suggestion had been Pirates, and with the Phobias comic, both of which were well received, and we did very well. But 12, it was actually based on Hercules, the 12 labours of Hercules. So we had to interpret those old mythology stories and interpret them any way we could. So mine actually, Steve would be a fan, was I did the Mathieson boar, I think you pronounce it. And I did it based as a highwayman in the 18th century, with modern interpretations and so forth. But that was weird enough. But Dave had, sorry, Dave, to out you like this, but
name now. It's out.
Dave did the cover, and the cover was based on the Men at Work road sign. The one about shoveling. Shoveling something.
Yeah.
And if you know your mythology, Hercules stories, there's one story about the stables and all the smelly stuff having to be swept away.
Right.
So it was a very subtle concept. But not only in the UK did people look a bit puzzled at what this comic called 12 was all about. 12 road signs? That doesn't sound very exciting. We also travel to Copenhagen every 2 years for a comic festival. And we had absolutely no hope. They didn't know what 12 meant. The road sign that worked in Danish was something totally different. it was a total disaster, but which I've almost forgiven Dave for.
Okay.
Yeah, but
So, Dave, do you have another comic in mind as the strangest thing you've ever worked on, or should we go with 12?
no, I didn't think that was strange. Actually, I thought it was quite good concept, and it came across very well in England. So I think mine's probably the hardest thing. I think I did was we used to do anthologies, themed anthologies, way back. So each year we'd have a different theme, like the zombies or robots or Western.
Yeah.
I think the toughest time I ever had was the Western one, where we, like Steve, we get different contributors. People say, "Oh, there's an idea," and I've got an artist lined up, and it was every story that came in was about revenge, and I had to give people ideas for comics to cut stories because I kept getting revenge Western. It just would have been a load of that guy bad and killing someone. It was just everything came through, and that was every week I was saying, "No, you can't do no revenge story." Please. Something else. Just so painful. I had to see the back of.
Cool. And Steve, do you have any memories of a strange comic you've worked on?
Yes, it's going way back now. It's back in the 90s, and it was a strip scene. And to be honest, I can't actually remember the title of it, but what I do remember, they'd asked me to do a story for it. So I'd done this. I think it was a 6-page story, and then when they sent me the copy through, they'd used the first page of the comic strip as on the cover, but they'd removed all the words, so it was just the parts. And of course, when you went in, then it was page 2. So the story then didn't make any sense whatsoever because of all the important stuff about the setup and everything and the parts of the plot, there on page 1. So it was a twist in the tale that didn't actually work because they understood what it was all about. And it even to this day, it just baffles me as a design choice that you would do that.
I think that might have been a mistake. I think. Well, it's been lovely chatting with you guys. It really has. Share my passion for comics with you, and so if people want to get hold of you, I'm just going to pop a couple of things up on the screen. So, Time Bomb you can reach on their website, timebombcomics.com. So do check that out. And with Accent, best I think via Twitter. Contact them via Twitter.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, look out on the web for various things that both Accent and Time Bomb have created over the years, and look out for the Asylum comics for starters, for Flintlock and for Brawler. I'm really looking forward to the next issue of Brawler, can I say? So no pressure, Steve, no pressure. But for now, thank you very much. It's been brilliant talking to you. It's been lovely to bring you guys together as well. It's been really good. So thanks very much. And hopefully it won't be too long before I see you again and can hold physical things in my hands, Colin. Yes. Cheers, guys. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers. So that was a lovely chat with the guys from Accent UK and Time Bomb Comics, Steve, Dave, and Colin. And again, just to remind you that all of this is building up towards Steampunk Over Ether. I hope you like the background. That's courtesy of one of the Asylum comics. And it features Count Rostov on that side and Lady M on the other side. And we might be doing something for the festival. We've got plans. We've got a sneaky little plan. So, yes. So don't forget the festival, 25th, 26th of April. Do send in your commissions and so on. Quick plug for the Cogneys. That's Cogkneys, the Cogneys. Look them up on Facebook. They're launching a new song tonight, and we're hoping to have a chat with them at some point on these interviews. We've got some good interviews lined up next week. We're hoping going to talk to Mr. B on Wednesday, I believe, and I've got a couple of others up my sleeve I'll tell you about next week. But until then, take care and stay safe, stay splendid. Cheers.